Hello, everyone. My name is Deeksha, and I'm part of the Startup India team. I've been associated with the team for almost 4 years now, and part of my engagements include connections with academic institutes, incubator capacity development, and women entrepreneurship activities. Uh, I welcome all of you for the webinar today, and I also thank the panelists joining us, taking their time out to have the discussion. Entrepreneurship in India has grown significantly, and startups are beginning to dramatically impact the Indian economy. Enabled by strong demographics and an open commercial culture, new company registrations have grown from 15,000 in 1980s to almost 18,73,000 by March 2019. With an average age of 28, India's entrepreneurs rank amongst the youngest in the world. The 30,000 plus TPIIT recognized startups have created almost 386,000 jobs as of June 2020. And many of these startups are beginning to spread benefits beyond the traditional locations into regional economies. The complexity of world is constantly adding new challenges, one of them being lack of opportunities for the high-skilled workforce. According to a report by Ministry of Skills and Program Implementation, the unemployment rate is the highest amongst the educated class in India. As India aspires to become the 5 trillion economy in the next 5 years, to reach this goal set by the Honorable Prime Minister, 300 million jobs need to be created by 2040. Additionally, the onset and spread of Covid-19 has left very few people, if any, unaffected. It is almost certain that the way entrepreneurial businesses are affected today will have an impact on how entrepreneurship is perceived as a job choice in the future. On one hand, the entrepreneurs need to confront another stark reality of an unprecedented downturn lumbering the global economy. However, on the other hand, it has also thrown open opportunities for individuals to work with others like never before. It has given great impetus to convergence, collaborations, and co-creations. In the current stage, where our collective optimism is focused on flattening the COVID-19 spread curve, we also need to rethink ways of empowering the economy, which has come to a disquieting pause. The Honorable Prime Minister of India, in one of his national addresses, announced measures for self-reliant India that is helmed by the local businesses. This directive makes the role of new age entrepreneurs imperative in restoring the pace of economy. Coined as Atmanirbhar Bharat, the directives have a substantial focus on the necessity and importance of entrepreneurial education. Entrepreneurs with the right amount of training will be better equipped to recognize and make the most emerging opportunities. Therefore, with the aim to educate and inspire the Indian educational institutions on the importance of entrepreneurship education and how to go online with the same, Startup India, Government of India is delighted to invite the panelists we have today. We have Professor Thomas Astibro from HEC Paris. Professor is the Laureate Professor of Entrepreneurship at HEC Paris, Academic Director, CDL Paris, Co-Director Entrepreneurship Track, HEC MBA Program, Academic Director of HEC Leadership Center. He is amongst the top 1% most downloaded authors on the SSRN, has made over 200 presentations and published over 40 academic journal articles. Welcome, Professor. We also have Professor Chris Carter from Schulich School of Business. Professor is a senior serial entrepreneur with more than 20 years of experience in the technology sector and a sought-after startup advisor, investor, and an advisory board member. He serves as co-director of entrepreneurial studies and entrepreneurs in residence with the Schulich School of Business, and also serves on the York University Entrepreneurship Council. He's the past president and co-founder of ThinData. Welcome, Professor. We also have Professor Deepak Natrajan from INSEAD. Professor Deepak is a technology industry veteran whose career spans 35 years as a venture capitalist, startup executive, and as a global marketing and sales executive at pioneering companies. He ran Intel Capital's SEA and ANZ operations from Singapore and served on the boards of 10 Intel Capital portfolio companies. As an adjunct professor at INSEAD, he teaches courses on corporate entrepreneurship and new business ventures. Welcome, Professor Deepak. Uh, we have Professor Rajesh Seal from IIT Bombay. Professor Zeal is going to complete a 4-year term as a professor in charge in IIT Bombay Research Park. He also serves as board member for Sign IIT Bombay's startup initiatives. Before joining IIT, he was the director at MaxLiner and has also served as the vice president of Mindtree. He has written over 20 papers, co-authored a book chapter, and also holds 8 US patents. Thank you everyone for joining us for the panel today. As we move towards the first topic of discussion, let me just take a moment to provide some context to the audience we have present here today. So researchers indicate that students' interest in one day becoming an entrepreneur increased as a result of taking an entrepreneurship course, and further, this interest was more pronounced amongst the students who had chosen to take the course online. However, a closer analysis showed that the students enrolled in the traditional classroom sections of the course were left with the impression of having better achieved the course objectives than the students enrolled in the online section. The differences observed can partly be attributed to the pedagogical approaches that were used in the online courses. I direct this question to Professor Kader and Professor Atibo. Is change in the traditional entrepreneurship pedagogy necessary to enhance the effectiveness of online classes, given the impact COVID-19 will have on entrepreneurship education and its curriculum? Professor Kader.
Thank you, Diksha, and thanks for the question and the invitation today. Well, I think one of the most important things to think about here is how do we recreate collaboration and community and connection inside an online environment? Because when you think about how entrepreneurship is often taught, both within the classroom or within accelerators, it's about bringing people together to co-create ideas. So one online class that we had just in the last number of months in new venture design, one of the key things that really allowed the course to break through is that we didn't keep it contained just to the weekly class session, those 3 hours where you're coming together. Instead, what we did was we paired the professor teaching the course with what we call an ICE, an in-class entrepreneur. And the in-class entrepreneur is an industry professor who's paired together with that academic professor and brings the contacts, the connections, the network, the extended relationship to the startup community into the classroom. So paired together, a different type of experience that goes with the academic and the practical. And then the job of the in-class entrepreneur is to actually draw, like in real time on the fly, people from the network within the startup community into the academic environment. So if we have a group that's coming up with a concept or an idea that's a food-based startup that they're working on, and they're trying to figure out issues around food production and packaging, then the in-class entrepreneur would draw within the network and bring in an alumni who's an entrepreneur or someone from the extended community who has deep experience in that particular area, and not only bring them into the classroom, but bring them into a series of side sessions for the groups that are being, working, the groups of students within the classroom. So there's always these sessions being booked and happening outside of this core, piece of the 3-hour class. And we just saw how that just lit up the experience in an incredible way. The point about this from an online perspective, we were already working with this and experimenting with this in the offline side of things. But online gives you this incredible opportunity where try to get someone to come on 2 hours notice to show up in a classroom and go all the way to the physical university and academic environment, not really probably optional. But get someone to, like, on the fly from the network to come in on the afternoon and spend 30 minutes on a key point of something through Zoom. So many people were happy and excited to participate in that way. So it just changed the dynamic of how we think about education as being preset modules and structure, and actually realizing that education and this experience could be an on-the-fly world, just like building a company is on the fly. It's not based on set rails and systems. So that would be my starting point for that conversation.
Got it. Professor Thomas, any thoughts from your side on this?
Yeah, I had lots of thoughts on this. Based on my experience, I was the founding academic director of the fully 100% online Master of Science in Innovation and Entrepreneurship that we started 5 years ago here at HEC. And we created 20 courses to put together this master degree. It's mostly targeted towards people that are already working full-time, middle managers that either wants to continue to rise in the hierarchy by furthering their managerial skills in innovation and entrepreneurship, or those that want to quit their jobs and become an entrepreneur. And so they probably already have accumulated a fair amount of wealth and are thinking of quitting working for the man and starting to work for themselves. So that was the basic target market that we were addressing. And I have to agree with Chris that you cannot take a regular course and just take your slides and sit and talk on Zoom for 3 hours. It just becomes awful. It is not a good way. So although we've struggled now in COVID times, my colleagues that hadn't been teaching online before to sort of try to adapt and do something a little bit more in the direction of what Chris was describing, it was really hard for them to create that kind of environment on the fly in 1 week or 2 weeks just before they started teaching online, never having done it before. But for our master program, it took us a year and a half to create these 20 courses. So you have to understand it's not simple to do, to completely turn around a normal classroom into an online classroom, and all the different tricks in the bag are allowed. You cut up, so we canned all the professors' lectures, pre-recorded them in a studio, and setting that up took about 6 months. Everyone was like scripted, on cue. Every little thing a person said was limited to about 4 to 5 minutes. After that, you cut the video and you did something else. This is just to make it so that people can study the courses while they're on the subway or in a bus, and they watch a video, and then they do an exercise, and the lecture gets cut up into manageable pieces. So those are a couple of things. I totally agree that online teaching has both its difficulties and its benefits. And one of the big benefits is to be able to have guests like we have here today, with people from all across the world. So they come in the classroom and give guest lectures. We have a lot of our alumni from our program now come in and give guest lectures because they've been through the program. They also started working at Entrepreneurs, and they come back and say, I had this thing happening to me. It's a lot of fun to hear. And we have people like Deepak who comes in and talks about raising venture capital. How is that process working? At the same time as you have a prof that gives the basics, and then a person like Deepak would give a lot of inside knowledge about how an industry works, or a specific fundraising situation, or a difficult issue to solve. This works great online, and we also have things like judging contests. So students work together in teams, and the students are spread all across the world. We have people attending the program from about 40, 50 different countries, and they work together in teams to deliver a pitch at the end of the program, and that is done in front of a jury, and the jury sits online and listen to the pitches. It works out well. So there's lots of different benefits from working online, but you have to adapt the pedagogy. You cannot use the same pedagogy as regular classroom teaching. It's just not feasible.
Absolutely, sir. Adding on to those points, Professor Natarajan, what pedagogical activities that require students to learn in action can institutes include in their online classrooms or courses to ensure improved student learning outcomes?
Yeah, I just want to, I don't think I'm going to necessarily disagree with the last two speakers, but the one thing I would say is that I've always used cases, practitioners, and an opportunity for people to learn by doing in my classrooms. And when I took my class online for the first time in May this year, I had just about 1 week's notice from INSEAD that we were going to move online, because on the 4th of May, I was ready to stand in front of the classroom and do the song and the dance like I always do. And on the 4th of May, the Singapore government announced that they will not allow INSEAD to open a week later on May 11th, which is when my class was scheduled. So I had to scramble a little bit to see how I would change the pedagogy of my class. And frankly, I found the online experience to be more beneficial in the way that I taught the class, because one of the things that I missed while teaching the class was the opportunity to break groups out into small groups to solve problems and come back and have them discuss it in front of the class. And using Zoom, I was able to create those little side rooms, pose a question, create side rooms, have 6 teams come back and talk about what they had learned, and then foster a discussion through that. So I actually found it to be an enhancement to the way I taught the class. Now, everybody has talked about practitioners. I've used practitioners all through my 4 years of teaching this entrepreneurship courses. Venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, other people from different industries and so on. And as everybody's already said, I was able to reach far and wide and get people to speak from various parts of the world. That was much harder to do when I was trying to do it in the classroom. I was kind of restricted to people who lived and worked in Singapore. So that was a great benefit. And I found it surprising in the end, frankly, that I was very proud of all the scores I'd received as a song and dance specialist for the last 4 years. And I had warned INSEAD that this is my first attempt at trying to teach this like a TV host. And I thought I warned them ahead of time that I'm an adjunct professor. I know you're going to measure me based on my scores, and they're probably going to be really low. So don't take it personally, and I won't either. And I was just shocked to see that I got a higher score than I got as a song and dance professor, because of the way I was able to combine these things a little bit better than I did in the classroom. So it's actually a very positive experience. And I hope that one of the things that this gets us to do in the future is to combine in-room, classroom teaching with online teaching. I think there are some great benefits.
Absolutely, sir. Professor Rajesh, we've been discussing taking entrepreneurship education online. Do you think ad hoc online entrepreneurship courses can play a role in encouraging the scientific and research community in India to start their own research-based ventures? And will the current entrepreneurship education pedagogy suffice to encourage PhD students and researchers, or a customized curriculum addressing the needs of the academic entrepreneurs need to be designed?
Thank you, Diksha and Kavya, for inviting me for this panel discussion. I wanted to make one comment, and I'm kind of going to, as usual, I like to take a controversial position to make things interesting. I mean, everybody is gaga about this online education, right? Nobody says that, hey, I mean, it's not politically correct to say online education is a bad thing, right? Of course, there are all these great benefits of online education for both people, for professors as well as for students. For students, we can get students from all over the world. And for professors, you get students who are, anywhere and everywhere. And currently in this scenario, we are forced into this situation. This online education business is, if that was the norm, all the universities would go belly up, right? So there is a reason why all these universities still exist. And the main reason, I mean, I look at our Indian way of education. I like to bring that into picture, the Gurukul way of education, right? Where the guru, the teachers are in an environment where the students are also residing and they are getting all their education. And there is a lot of thing that is being transmitted between a teacher and the student when they are in physical proximity. Okay. Now, none of that happens during online education, which is okay. I mean, in the COVID times, we don't want anything other than education to transmit from one person to another person. There are great benefits. What I feel is the benefit is kind of skewed. The benefit is skewed for students. You know, students get a lot. However, the professors don't get a lot. I mean, that's my biggest complaint, because you're not alive in front of your audience, and it's like, you know, you're performing in a movie versus performing in a drama. When you're doing a drama, you're actually acting in front of a crowd, and you get a lot of subtle cues, and you can adapt accordingly. In the online education, you have none of that. It's like all your stuff is flatly recorded, and like Professor Deepak said, he does the song and dance show, and he's great at it. So he can record that, and then people will enjoy that. But the part I miss the most in this online education business is that the direct eye contact and direct support from the students. Having said that, when it comes to, you know, this, the current scenario is such that, you know, we have to live with it. I don't know how long. So we have to adapt. And online education is the way to adapt right now. And we are all adapting, and we are all improvising. And, you know, I look at it as a challenge to make things interesting for students. What I would be very curious is a true comparison between online education and, let's call it, offline education, is the effectiveness of that education. Maybe right now we feel that the education is effective because we don't have any other way of comparing. But as your opening statement itself said, that whenever the education was conducted in physical proximity, then results were a lot different. What we are doing at IIT Bombay, I'm coming back to the entrepreneurship point that you asked, is again, you know, I'm kind of the misfit in this panel discussion, because I don't have any formal education in entrepreneurship. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I'm a techie. I've been working with my hands, building things, and I just happened to get into startups, and it was very intoxicating. So I continued staying in startups, did my own startups. Some survived, some didn't. And then about midlife, I kind of moved into academia to enjoy this also and teach the students of what I have learned so far. What I find at IIT Bombay, what we have done in terms of entrepreneurship, traditionally what you see is, you know, there are these business schools and there are technical schools, like IIT Bombay, let's say. And the education is kind of geared in one way or the other. What we have tried to do here at IIT Bombay is we have both on the same campus, along with something very important, which is like a startup incubator on campus. So there are four key elements we have brought on campus: the technical education, startup incubator. Along with that, there is a entrepreneurship education, and the fourth element we have is a research park. What we do in research park is we have brought big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies on campus. So they reside on campus. So our professors and students can go work over there. In the startup environment, our students can go and try out their ideas. Our professors can go and try out their ideas and try to see if we can succeed. And right there, they need some kind of entrepreneurship education, so that they have the classroom possibilities on campus. So in the technical education itself, there is something we have created called majors and minors. So in the major, you could do the computer science or electrical engineering, and in a minor, you can take entrepreneurship. So you can supplement your education with online classes or entrepreneurship education. And this kind of gives us a great balanced portfolio for steering our students in the right direction. Also, one thing we are also rewarding and incentivizing is working on problems which are relevant to India, the local situation, as well as the local industry. So we can target our students, their startups or their solutions towards these solving these problems, which are real-time problems. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, I'm kind of giving you an answer to the question.
Got it, sir. I think there are definitely pros and cons to both online and offline education system when it comes to the accessibility, the number of mentor pool that we can have with the online system, and the interest, the connection that is built through the offline education system. Uh, it's about the Indian science, technology, and innovation system struggles from the European paradox. We have a strong science base, but a weak innovation performance. This implies that although India's output in terms of number of scientific publications and patents filed has improved significantly over the past decade, yet the rate of conversion of such researchers into commercially successful stories is significantly lower. Professor Rajesh, I would again like to come to you on this question. We would want to understand whether it is the disinclination towards working in the commercial realm that drives researchers and scientists away from the startup ecosystem, or that the traditional science education system in India does not embrace entrepreneurship. Therefore, many young scientists feel unqualified. In other words, is a mindset shift amongst researchers and scientists, or a change in traditional pedagogy of technical institutions required to bridge the gap between the scientific community and the startup ecosystem?
Thank you for the question. It's a very deep question, and I would like to answer that question with a keen observation. I have stayed so much. I spent so much time in United States during my professional life, and also, of course, in India now. And here is a small observation I would like to bring it out to you, all others can contradict me in that sense. What I have observed is students or researchers in India or anywhere else, they are no different. They are all the same. They are equally capable. They are very, very good. What I find that is a handicap in the Indian context is more subtle, and it's all about culture. Okay, you will laugh at it, but this observation came through when I was thinking about the differences that I have observed. Right. So in India, there is a very strong dependence of our youth on their parents. I'm making a very controversial statement. And in my opinion, that has a lot to do with how much risk each individual can take. Let's say you're in United States. For first 18 years, you're with your parents. After 18, the bird has to fly out of the nest, right? And at that point, when I was there, I would find it very ruthless. That how do you how are these kids going to fly on there? But they do really fine, and they do take a lot of risk. They are very successful, and I have observed that that has been happening there quite a lot. Some of them fail, but they rise up and then they do really well. In India, we are very much dependent on our parents as youth, and what I find is this ability to take decisions with incomplete information is our handicap. Having said that, what I have seen is recently this thing has been changing. I see the dynamics changing. In old days, when I did my first startup in India, I couldn't get people to join my startup because they were interested in the brand name. My startup didn't have a brand name. They wanted to be in a brand name company so that they're ready for their marriage and the rest of the story, right? Now it's exactly the other way around. The students in my bachelor's class, they think that it's cool to be in a startup. Okay, so there is a transformational shift that I see in person, and it's really good. The parents are supporting their kids. I just wish that the parents would let go of their kids. I see so many students come to my office with their parents, and the parents are hovering over them. And first thing I tell them is, you stay outside. The students are old enough; they're adults. We can discuss whatever the matter with them, and they can keep it secret. But as Indian parents, I'm finding it very hard to stay out of my kids' life. So I think that's the habit that I'm going to break when it comes to when they are ready to fly out of the nest. So it will be an interesting experience. So coming back to your question, right? What we do at IIT Bombay is it's something very interesting in the sense that we have everything on campus, and students are as they are taking all these courses, they are rewarded for their participation in various activities. And I feel the new generation is very different. And maybe 5 years down the road, you will be changing your statement that, hey, the situation is not the same anymore. The students are, they are taking risks, and it's a slow change, but I'm very optimistic and positive about what we are doing over here. I feel that the government, Indian government, has a lot to do with it. Just like this seminar you are organizing, the Startup India, all these different organizations, they are doing their bit. There is a lot of funding coming in through these startup activities, and it's rewarding. It's allowing people to take some risks because there is some financial capital available, and there is a lot of glory that people can enjoy once their startup succeeds. And I think the key thing I'm seeing with the students is that even if a startup fails, it's okay. You can try another one. The failure can also be taken as a star on your on your collar, that you survived and you did just fine. So again, a long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that's interesting.
Definitely, sir. I think those are valid points. Professor Thomas, you've indicated some very interesting thoughts in your research paper regarding the academic entrepreneurship. Would you like to share the same with the audience we have today?
Sure. And I think I should just start out agreeing quite a lot with Professor Rajesh. From his experience, the basic data, both from the United States and Europe, tells the same story. India should not rely on their professors to create startups that will drive the country forward. It's the youth, it's the students of those professors that will create the next big technologies, the next big companies out of the research labs. If you look at the top 300 research universities in the United States, the modal number of spin-outs from these research universities that are started by professors is 0. That's the mode, okay? The mean is something like 2 or 3 spin-outs per year. It's only places in the absolute top, like Stanford and MIT in particular, that produces a lot more spin-outs by professors, and they're on the order of 30 per year. Instead, where are the bulk of the number of startups coming from that the universities are generating? They're coming from the graduates. They're coming from the students that work with the professors. For every professors, there's 30 on average students graduated each year. If 10 of those students start up a business based on something that they found in the research lab at the professor, the economy will change on a dime. I mean, it's just, the numbers are just astounding what the students would be able to do. And so that's where a country like India needs to put its resources. And it's a matter of the connection with the research lab being at the absolute forefront in terms of technology and innovation, and the students being able to work in those labs together with those professors and taking that knowledge and then starting up companies again and again and again. And the professors just serve as the instigator, the person that creates the seed for these innovations, and that's what we should be looking for. Not to try to push the professors to start up companies. The numbers will not be the same, and the professors will be out of the lab and not actually teaching the next year students to create the next generation technology. So I think it's a complete foolishness to try to push professors to become entrepreneurs. It's a misuse of resources. That's not what the focus should lie in. It should be on the students that would like to become entrepreneurs, and they need to have the right resources in the university to be able to snap up the new and hot stuff. Thanks.
Can I just add one thought to that, just to build on that? So one of the things that I think, just to extend beyond the professor, that's really important that the school or the university can provide is accelerated access to network for the graduating student as it relates to their business. It's supremely powerful. With the Schulich School of Business, we have nearly 40,000 global alumni, and they are in every category of business or venture capital or possibility in the world. So what we found is very powerful is matching those graduating students with their entrepreneurial ventures within the alumni community and helping them to get their commercialization on fast track. So that's just another role. I agree wholeheartedly. That professor has that instigating, moment and helping them to see what's possible. But if we stay with them beyond the graduation and we give them access in a different way, it's going to have a real significant impact. And right now at Schulich, my team and I have supportive management with 150 student and recent graduate companies, and that has been an instrumental factor in them achieving the first level of success.
Got it. Now, going beyond the scientific community, students get most of their business basics from their business core classes and not just from the entrepreneurship classroom, although there is overlap in both. So entrepreneurship basics and entrepreneurial mindset and competencies represent the majority of what is taught in the entrepreneurship classrooms across the globe. The dichotomy of these two categories is where the biggest challenge to widespread online entrepreneurship education lies. While teaching entrepreneurship basics seems to be well suited for traditional approach to teaching online, teaching entrepreneurial mindset may require non-traditional or new approaches to the online education. I open the following question to all the panelists. What are some of the best practices that institutes can adopt to ensure effectiveness of their online program? We can start with Professor Deepak.
Yeah, so I just want to do one thing before I answer that question specifically, and let's just go back to some of the reflections on this question of why and how India and other emerging markets can really drive more innovation. I think when you consider the countries that are considered innovative today, there are sort of three characteristics, and I can go back to the US and make the same claim from the 60s. First, good STEM education, which India is very good at. Okay, so we produce lots of great science and engineering graduates, and we're very good at that. The second is government R&D spending, which then gets commercialized at a steady pace. Now, India does a lot of commercial government R&D spending. We have satellites, we've sent rockets, we've sent rovers, we've done all kinds of things, but that doesn't seem to find its way as easily into the commercial realm. The country that's really perfected that is Israel, and that's why it's a startup nation. They spend 4.2% of GDP on R&D across academia, industry, and government, and they managed to translate that very well into commercial products. South Korea is another example. They spend 4%. OECD average is about 2.9. Emerging markets tends to be about 1. Now, India, in some ways, punches above its weight in talent when it comes to emerging markets. So I think we should do more of that in order to get some of this benefit of what we do. The third thing is IP protection. Now, if you talk about people starting companies, the last thing you want is you take all your intellectual property, spend 2 years getting a product out there, and somebody rips it off 5 minutes later. That is a very key element of what motivates entrepreneurs to go start companies. So especially if you're doing deep R&D, you don't want that thing to get just ripped off. And I think that's the third area to invest. So I want to just address that first. Can you repeat the thrust of your question so that I address that next?
So we want to understand what sort of best practices can institutes adopt to ensure effectiveness of online delivery of the education or the entrepreneurial education precisely.
Yeah, I'll maybe say something controversial, which is I think we are moving into a world where skills are more important than the degree and the university at which you get it. And so getting back to the question of, why is everybody excited about online education? It's not because we all look like we're in a TV studio. We aren't. It's actually because we're moving to a world where skills is essentially what gets you hired. And you might have noticed Google has just announced a program where for relatively small amounts of time and small amounts of money, they're equipping you to be well skilled so that when you graduate, you actually get a job at Google, which, by the way, is a trick in itself. For those of us who've tried to get a job at Google, you'll know how many interviews you have to go through and how many smart people you have to fox with your questions and all that. So it's actually very interesting to me that that people are acquiring these skills in other modes. And I would say that one of the areas where INSEAD and others, I'm sure, are investing heavily now is actually not having courses that used to have titles like in the old days, Accounting 101 and Management Accounting and things like that, but getting down to digitization of businesses and something that's very practical so that when you walk into your job, you already can hit the ground running because you understand the basics of how to get something done in a traditional industry and move it online. So that's one of the greatest opportunities. I was reading a survey, I think it was about 2 years ago, where when you look at the global 2,000 companies, less than 1,000 of them even had a web presence, okay? So you can just imagine, this was 2 years ago. This is 25 years after Netscape. Well, today is 25 years after Netscape went public. 2 years ago was 23 years after Netscape went public. 23 years after Netscape went public, less than 800 or 900 companies actually had a web presence out of 2,000. So you can just see the challenge these companies have in just getting on with it and being more accessible and doing business in the world that millennials are growing up in. I don't think millennials want to go anywhere to buy anything anymore. They want everything delivered either online or in person by somebody else. So I'd say that if there's one thing that all universities should do is to figure out what set of courses would get somebody to the front of the line when it comes to the next job opportunity and start putting courses together that are very atomic and specific to that. And it may not be one course, it may be a series of 3 courses. But that, I think, would be much more valuable in building a clientele for online education.
I think that's just to build on that. I think that that's a great set of points, and I think that there's 2 areas of course innovation. One is definitely around the practical, and I've got some really interesting examples in the COVID side around that. But the other piece of that that's really important is really giving them the entrepreneurial soft skills and mindset skills that are there. So one of the things we introduced this year was a course. Again, you're talking about different titles. Our course is called Mentorship Match. A lot of times you would send students to an internship and they would like do research and sit in the corner and just put their head down and do their thing. What we said was, could we take 20 of the top MBAs, recruit 20 leading founders and venture capitalists, and go to those founders and say, would you mentor them on a special project where they're going to work for you on a special project that you personally want to get done? That's your own project, not the rest of the company, but you. Would you commit to spending 2 to 3 hours per week one-on-one with that student and guiding them through the project and teaching them about what your mindset is for the company? And then 3, can you commit to 2 meetings a week where they will join and follow you in board meetings, stand-ups, client presentations, investor deals, and then have them observe how you lead and how you work? Now, the student came through that, those 20 students came through that with a complete mind shift in terms of how they thought about problem solving and how they thought about work. They came through it with a breakthrough relationship, now a mentor who they're connected to for life in many of these cases. And finally, they came through with a seismic shift on their LinkedIn profile because when they graduated, they were reporting through that course to the CEO of Tulip Retail, Ali, and everybody knows who that is in Toronto, and doors opened overnight because they were capable of holding that relationship. So I think we can do like detailed technical skill, improvement, but the soft skill side as well is very powerful.
I would like to add something to that.
Yes.
Just quickly, what Chris just said is it strikes a chord for me. One of the things I found during my industry career is I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of engineers for jobs in various companies I was part of and my own company. And what I found was we had to put in at least 6 to 8 months to take them where their productivity would be like they'll be independent people. And my observation was that there was this piece missing about how do you become a professional. Our academia is providing them the technical education, but this piece is missing where they become professionals. And I started doing something like that over here at IIT Bombay, and the response has been tremendous. I mean, these are all simple things, so simple, so trivial things, but they can transform your effectiveness. And a very simple thing like you need to dress appropriately. A very simple thing like you need to respond to your emails within 24 hours. And so these are all the words of wisdom we learn from experienced people when you hang out with people who are professionals. And this is something I started teaching to my group of students and at IIT Bombay, and we have a class about being a professional also. And see, this soft skill part you just mentioned, this is a very invaluable piece that's missing in our today's graduates. And I think it will go a long way in making a difference to this education. What worries me though is that when we go into this online education part, I am really kind of clueless right now is how do you impart this being professional skill online. But we have to be innovative about that and kind of still make it through, because as soon as this COVID times are over, we are going to go back to the new normal, and we have to kind of pick up all the best things we learned during the COVID time, continue with them along with the old stuff that used to work really well. So, yeah, Professor Astro, yeah, please.
Yeah, it's Chris and Rajesh points in an important direction. We're actually testing whether you can teach soft skills in entrepreneurship online or not. We have an experiment that we run in Ecuador. A couple of them actually, with the total number of high school students that participated is somewhere around 40,000. And we randomly allocate soft skills trainings to them and compare it to hard skills training. And the tests are not done yet, so we don't have a lot of data, but the training is online, okay? So the soft skills training is a packaged course, 12 hours of training, both in taking personal initiative and in learning how to negotiate. And this is in particular for high school students to be able to have the courage to go to university and take a STEM education. So this is what we're trying to prepare them for, and breaking off from staying at home with their parents. We'll see where the results will be, but this is large-scale randomized controlled trials where we'll have some results in a year or so. So I just wanted to mention that.
If I may, if your time is not too expensive, I'd like to book an hour of it to talk to my son about responding to emails within 24 hours.
I think the other thing, just to build on what we were talking about with both those last discussions, is that we need to continue to remember that a global world has opened up through Zoom, and that there's a shift in terms of professionals around the world and how they're willing to engage and how companies are performing. Many of our companies are never going back to physical environment. They are not returning to their real estate. They're putting their money into other places, and they're going to continue to operate online or be in some hybrid kind of version. But what that's opened up, so for example, we would have had, Schulich has an India MBA program with a full campus in Hyderabad, and the students are approximately 50 of them, first year in Hyderabad, then they come to Toronto for second year. So this year we created a MBA internship program, and we did deep matching with 30 of the students from the program with 30 startup founders in Toronto, and had them work on their companies with them. And the borders and geography and time and space meant nothing, right? They worked, they had unbelievable experiences, and the doors were opened up to these matches across the world. So I think we can also really shift our mindset in terms of how placements work and how connections into new countries and communities and relationships are built. And all these students that when they arrive, when they finally arrive, we can't wait to welcome them to Toronto. When they arrive, they're going to have have now a set of local contacts and friends and colleagues that are going to make their successful entrance into the Toronto experience different. So I think we just got to continue to look at how there's a global perspective in terms of how we can engage people in the entrepreneurial ecosystems that crisscross the globe.
I'd like to add a point on one of the previous points again about professors and their inclination or desire or the pressure we put on them to start companies. I was very fortunate to have been a very early employee at Silicon Graphics, which was started by Jim Clark and 6 of his PhD students at Stanford. And I lived and breathed the culture and the work that they did in the company. I was employee number 70 or 72 or some such thing. And of course, the company went on to become a huge company afterwards. And Clark went on, and he had that instinct about him that he knew how to motivate students to do great things and to do it in a business setting, so that they weren't just becoming airy-fairy ivory tower researchers, but doing practical things. In fact, probably a very less known story is that when they designed the first geometry engine, which was the chip that was the basis for a Silicon Graphics machine, Jim Clark had an architecture for the machine which differed from his PhD student Mark Hanna's architecture. And so it was a challenge when they set up the company as to whose architecture was going to win, and Mark's architecture won. So they actually built the first machine based on the PhD student's architecture. But that aside, Jim went on to inspire students to start other companies. He started Netscape with Mark Andreessen from Illinois. He then started Healthion with a bunch of students. So, there is value to having PhD professors become icons of success in the world of business, because that's what motivates students too. I mean, just like we talk about India not having as much of a success in the world of entrepreneurship, as we get more examples of that, whether it's the Flipkart guys or some software company that gets built, everybody then looks at that and goes, yeah, I can do that too. And that makes a big difference as well. So I don't want to completely dismiss the idea of encouraging PhD professors to get out there, because then some of these PhDs will take that knowledge and go build a business around it instead of wallowing around in the world of research. Sorry to use that term.
No, I agree. Role models are very important for these students in order to, see some kind of beacon of light of where they could potentially go. We're trying to see how much that matters in this online experiment that we're conducting, where we actually shoot videos of role models, and then we randomly allocate how many of these role models they see, and we'll be able to experimentally actually get at exactly what you're looking at, what you're asking for, Deepak. We will see, how many more students will actually go to university based on how many more role models did they see in these videos. And these videos are not very long. They're 15, 20 minutes altogether, but they might make a huge difference. And now we're talking about people that are located very, very far away from the big city, and they're in rural community. They have no other opportunity to see an entrepreneur or a scientist than through this video. So it's going to be exciting to see how that works out. I totally with you.
I also agree. I think it's very important for students to have these role models, have these success stories to actually motivate them and encourage them to take the entrepreneurial path. Building on to your point of the new normal, coping up with the COVID situation, in the current environment, learning to adapt with ambiguity has become crucial to entrepreneurship. While many entrepreneurs will fail to combat and adapt to the challenges posed by COVID-19, several will find opportunity in the chaos. How can universities interlink crisis management and entrepreneurship education, thereby helping aspiring student entrepreneurs to innovate to combat the current societal challenges? Professor Thomas, your thoughts on this point?
Okay, I'm going to be quite brief here, because I think that both Deepak and Rajesh has a lot of interest in this question. I'm coming from experience in United States and Europe, where there are fewer barriers to produce startups now compared to what it was in the 60s and 70s. There's been huge changes in the United States with the evolution of the Bayh-Dole Act and what happened after that. And same thing in Europe. There is no longer a European paradox. I mean, European professors produce as many startups and as many patents as US university professors. But India might be in a very different situation that I don't know very much about. But if we go from what the experience is in these countries that I have knowledge about, you know, if I was a university president and I had $100,000 or $1 million, I would not put that on technology transfer activities. That's already working fine. I would put that money in the research lab and make sure that the students get the absolutely best knowledge that's at the frontier of knowledge development, so that when they start up their company, they don't do something stupid.
May I add something? Diksha, you asked a very important question in these COVID times, right? What we have seen and what I have experienced, I'll share that with you. So during these COVID times, you know, you can react like you give up, you close the shop, and you move on, and you wait, you hibernate, and you come back. But what we have chosen to do at IIT Bombay is we have decided to invest in solutions for COVID itself. So our, you know, we have a R&D department which, you know, where we have funding available, and we get funding from the government as well. And specifically, even my lab, we have a bunch of students working on a COVID-related solution. And what I'm trying to tell you is that when you are trying to solve the problem which is around you, the students, the faculty, everyone is so energized to find a solution because it's going to make a dent. It's going to make a difference to people around you. And I see this huge enthusiasm. If let's imagine some problem that you're trying to solve, which is going to help some small difference somewhere in the world, you know, which you cannot explain to your mother about, right? I consider that not so exciting. But if there is something you could do with your hands, with your solution, with your research, then that makes a huge difference. And what I find is that this COVID has turned into an opportunity for us to solve some of these tough problems, specifically related to healthcare. We can use electrical engineering, we can use mechanical engineering, we can use you know, fluid dynamics. We can use all these variety of disciplines together to solve a few problems which this COVID has thrown at us. And our faculty, our students are actively working on it. There have been special privileges granted for students to come on campus to work on these problems. And I really appreciate that. The students really appreciate this, you know, push to do something for our country, our nation, and people around us, you know, to make a difference. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but these are exciting times to do research, you know, because you have a live problem that you want to work on, and you can make a difference, and you know, the rewards are tremendous if you are successful. So,
absolutely. Professor Chris, your thoughts?
Yes, I just want to add a specific example from Schulich and York University that we took on during the crisis. And this would be the category of what I would describe as entrepreneurial service learning. So when there's a crisis or when there's a situation that needs to be dealt with within the country or within the region, what is your ability to harness entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial thinking students to help with that problem? One of the things that we saw was going to be a big problem was that Main Street businesses, the local businesses along the streets, were going to be really hard hit because of the fact we were all withdrawing from physical environment. So together with a group of people from Schulich and York, from the different levels of city and provincial and federal government, and then Facebook and Google and Shopify and a whole collection of technology companies, we created this initiative called Digital Main Street. And we set a goal to bring thousands and thousands of these small Main Street businesses into the digital environment, create their first website, get them set up on Google, get them into Facebook, understanding how to advertise on Instagram. And we realized that the people who were best suited in the world to help these small businesses make those transformations were our entrepreneurial-minded students. And guess what those students needed for the summer? They needed a job placement. because all the jobs in the economy upheaval were going away. So we paired industry need and their opportunity to onboard these businesses in the future onto their platforms, government support, and the university and the school coming behind it with the students. And we hired 100 students paid for the summer to work and begin the transformation of the Main Street economy. And that's been going on through the summer and is now grown into an initiative that has massive support behind it. And we have like an on-target goal of, by the time the year is done, onboarding 50,000 small Main Street businesses into the digital economy. So I think that we as universities and science schools and tech schools and business schools, we can also think about, we can think about the individual technical problems we can solve within a crisis, but we can also think about wider societal issues we can solve, and how do we harness the power of this like incredible talent that we have in our students and bring it to bear to tackle the problem in real time. So that for us has been an incredible experience. And again, another life-changing moment where those students emerge from that. And to your point, Deepak, they learn these very valuable technical skills now of how to target with Instagram and how to work with Google and how to integrate Shopify and Facebook together. But they also had the experience of being on the phone with businesses that were in crisis, with small business owners saying to them on the phone, I'm not going down like this. And the moment where they rallied together in this entrepreneurial service learning environment to support the country and support these small business people. And I'm telling you, like the difference between these students before they went through that experience and what they've done now, both emotionally, personally, leadership wise, but also technical skills. So how can we like bring all these things together when they're needed and be a force for good as schools and institutions behind these challenges is a big inspiration for us.
All right, Professor Nitrajan, we would like to have your thoughts as well, not just from the entrepreneurship perspective, but from a perspective of an investor as well.
So I think the best way to answer this question is to tell you what's going on in the world of investing these days. Every VC is performing triage on their portfolios, right? There are companies that are thriving because of COVID. There are companies that are thriving in spite of COVID, or maybe not thriving but doing well enough. And there are companies whose business plans have completely died because if COVID persists even for 2 more years, they will not survive. They don't have the cash to survive, or the business models have changed completely and they won't survive. And so as an investor type, you first have to figure out, what's the opportunity in the company and how long is the window for it to exploit that opportunity. And you have to, if you're investing in an early stage company, you have to know that, unless you're crazy lucky, you're not going to exit that deal in 1 year or 2 years before COVID goes out the window. And maybe it'll never go out the window. And maybe you don't have to wait that long for the sentiment around a particular idea to change. If by 6 months from today, there is a credible COVID vaccine, then any COVID-related idea will probably die immediately, just as some businesses died as soon as COVID happened. So this is a tricky game to play. So you have to try to get into companies that have an initial idea that may rely on the current environment, but have the ability to take that idea and pivot into a healthier world than we are living in today. Okay, so that's sort of the first thing I would do if I was an investor type at this point. The second thing I wanted to say, and we've got into a lot of discussion about India and what's causing less entrepreneurship or more entrepreneurship by whatever measure. I look at India, I've never made an investment in India, even though I did serve on a board in India for 18 months or so. But I look at India and I go, this is the perfect storm of opportunity for India, because the markets are developing based on the income levels of the consumer. And we know that those income levels have been rising. And that's always a good sign for consumer businesses. We've already talked about the fact that India has an incredibly well-trained population. Now, it doesn't reach the bottom of the pyramid, but you don't need the bottom of the pyramid. As strange as it may seem, only 1 in 3 people in the US has a 4-year college degree. The rest of them don't. And I think something like 20% are actually high school graduates. So the rest are in between with 2-year college degrees, vocational training, community college, and so on. So it takes, sort of the tip of the spear to move everybody forward. And the last thing I'd say is, especially in the market, especially in the environment that I see in India, and the people I've met who are starting new companies, they have what I think is the most effective mindset for entrepreneurship in an emerging market, which is you can't start with the things that business schools teach you when you go to emerging markets. You can't start with, okay, here's my business plan, and here's my moat, and here's my competition, and here's my this, and here's my that. You kind of have to sit there and do what I read in a paper called effectual reasoning, which is, what do I know, what do I have, and whom do I know? And that's how you get businesses started. And some of the best entrepreneurs in the world start with those three questions, which is, I want to get a business started, but what do I know, whom do I know, and how do I get this thing started? And I see that in spades in India more so than any other place, especially Southeast Asia, where I live, and I've lived now for 12 years. I've made investments in Vietnam and so on. Vietnam is the only other place where I've seen that. Everywhere else in Southeast Asia, people tend to be much more cloistered around working for Citibank or some other big company when they graduate, for all the reasons that Rajesh enumerated earlier.
Got it. Thank you. I think these are some very valuable inputs, which I think will benefit the audience we have today. We are good with the panel questions, and we would like to now. I would like to now have two open questions which we have received from the audience. The first question has been directed towards Professor Deepak and Professor Thomas. Several Indian universities support incubation and acceleration programs. However, very few provide funding support. Should universities provide seed funding to student entrepreneurs given their current aversion towards the new venture creation? Professor Thomas?
Sorry. My answer to that very quickly is no, they should not. That's not what they're good at. They should maybe start accelerators. I am a part of an accelerator myself that I run at, I'm an academic director at Paris called Creative Destruction Lab. It was started actually at the University of Toronto by Professor Ajay Agarwal. And this is an accelerator that's not paid by the university. University paid absolutely nothing for this. It's funded by wealthy people, donors, who think that this is a great program. And just very briefly, any Indian student or potential entrepreneur can apply to this program. We have been taking in applications. They take in applications every year. And the proceedings are done online. So all the meetings between the mentors and the ventures that are accepted into this program are done 100% online. You come in and you meet with maybe 30 mentors. Many of them are of the status of Jim Clark, which is someone that we discussed before. The founder of Klarna, the founder of Eventbrite, the founder of Odesk, founders of really important companies that have cashed out, and they are interested in lending a hand, accelerating startups with really great ideas that are coming out of universities and scientists' labs. That's the focus of the Creative Destruction Lab. And in Paris, we're going to focus on climate change when we start up now in the fall. But the main point that I want to say with this, it's great if the universities act as a matchmaker between entrepreneurs and mentors, but there's no need for the universities to pay for this. Money can be gotten from other sources.
Professor Deepak?
I agree completely. I think it's the same answer. If you ask me a question, should government create jobs for everybody, or should they create an environment where private industry thrives and hires everybody? The answer is obviously the latter. Same thing with universities. Universities should be a crucible of ideas generation, and then they should create this, I hate this word, but ecosystem of people with money who are better at evaluating whether the ideas that are being generated in the labs have business potential and investing in them. And as Thomas said, I mean, these days there are probably more accelerators than startups. So there's plenty of people who sit around a table and evaluate the startup and try to decide whether to write a small check or a big check. So I would very much like universities to stay away from funding decisions and focus on the R&D part of it, or the R part of it, and leave the B and the business creation to professionals who do that for a living and who have a financial incentive to make it happen, because that's the biggest driver.
So may I say something?
Sure, sir.
So I'm going to say something controversial. So to make things interesting, right? So at IIT Bombay, what we have is we have a society called Sign, which is more like a ecosystem creator. So our biggest strength has been at IIT Bombay. Originally, we started out as an undergraduate education school, and over a period of time, it morphed in such a way that now we have almost 50-50 type of split with the postgraduate education. Now the postgraduate students have a lot of research ideas along with their professors, and they are very keen to take these ideas forward. So this particular society that we have, it promotes doing a startup on campus, so the students can formulate a startup with their professors or on their own, and the society will provide some sorts of funding as an incubation center. What as Professor Astebro said, right? The university should not be in the business of doling out money to startup, and so this is a little bit of a different experiment where the money is given to survive, so that the students can do some basic things with that money, and they get a lot of support from mentors at our business school in this process. Also, our network of all the successful IITians who are already out there is also tied to this. All the companies who are more than 150 companies have been spawned through this. 39 of them failed, but many of them have graduated, many of them become successful. So this entire ecosystem, which has been going on for more than 10-15 years, has been pushing the innovation to the leading edge. And this has helped us quite a lot in terms of formulating this startup culture within IIT Bombay. So people think, because you have to change the mindset. In India, you have to change the mindset. And if you create this mindset of startup, then people will come. What I'm really happy to tell you also is that the government is deeply involved in steering the research in certain directions. So if there is a strong desire or strong need for the society to have research or startups in certain areas, in the government funds, and our Sign organization, I'm also part of this organization as a board of directors. And we steer, basically, we are working with the government so that the startups which are going in that direction are also properly funded. So it's been an exciting experiment, and we are very happy to see the results the way they are happening.
Just to build on that and add another quick experiment that we've been doing, we're thinking about how we actually merge those worlds together. So as opposed to there being a hard line between the courses and between money, we've taken a couple of the courses and we've said the student's going to go through a new venture design course to create a company. And they're going to be marked by the academic, right? And there's no money involved in that. That's your mark. But we're going to create a secondary part of it where on the final presentation of your new venture concept, you will present to a panel of angel and venture capital investors. They will assess the winning pitch that emerged from the classroom. And there's money from a donor, not from the university, but money from a donor waiting for them should they win the pitch from what emerges from the classroom. So I think we can also think about some hybrid concepts as to how we put these things together.
Understood. So I think it's sort of a mixed comment that we've received. Professor Rajesh feels that it is important that the university provides like basic funding support to startups to move from an ideation stage to like a prototype or maybe validation stage, wherein others feel it should be sort of an hybrid model wherein we get private players or donors to invest money into startups. Moving on to the next question, which is also the last question that we have from the audience today. While we have seen how corporate academia partnerships can encourage entrepreneurship, startup academia partnership has not been thoroughly explored. Could potential partnerships between startup and academia be a useful way to encourage growth hackers to become future entrepreneurs? Professor Chris, if you have any thoughts around this question.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that the more, and you've heard this as a theme throughout the conversations here and there, but the more that we can make these experiences real, the more we can have them working on real things, the more we can have them engaged in learning deeply from mentors and connections and people who are like helping expose them to the soft skills and the different practical skills that are there, the better. So I think for us, I'm looking at how can we take, I gave you that last example from digital Main Street and helping these small businesses. So now I'm thinking about how do we create an academic level partnership with some of those enterprises that we talked about for teaching those practical skills, working on real companies and solving their problems while guided in an entrepreneurial mindset by the professor. So I think if we open our mind to finding those kinds of enterprise partnerships, but what I would just leave you with on this point is that bigger is not necessarily better. It's not necessarily the giant corporation that is going to bring the transformational experience for the young entrepreneur. It may be that working like side by side on something with that person who's in a 20-person company at an earlier stage is what is going to open their mind. So I think when we talk about enterprise, we should talk about a wide variety of types of industry engagement that can go from small to large along the path. I'm interested to hear what my colleagues think about that as well.
I would like to add one brief thing. I know you're running out of time. One observation that I have in this brief experience that I have had here is as a human being, we would like to do great things. You know, we want to do great things. We want to do big things. My opinion is let's go exactly opposite. Let's do little things. Let's do incremental things which can make a difference. And once we get used to these incremental things, then of course we can take on the big challenges. And that's what I try to tell my students. Hey, take that little small step first today. See if we can make a dent, make a small difference. And then once you get used to these making small steps, then you can definitely take a big step. So I think that experience has been very rewarding to see students take small steps and then coming up with a giant success during the course of time.
Absolutely. Professor Thomas, Professor Deepak, do you have any inputs on the question?
No, I don't. So maybe Thomas should take it.
Yeah. So I'm going to revert back to the example I described before on Creative Destruction Lab. It's a very successful acceleration organization, and it is a partnership between academia and, in particular, serial entrepreneurs who serve as mentors for these people that are coming out of research labs and government institutions and have great ideas but have no clue about how to be an entrepreneur. And they get an injection that is enormous in how to accelerate their company from people that have done this over and over and over again. And so if you want to sort of take the ecosystem of Silicon Valley and port it to Bombay or any other place in the world, and you say, what's the key thing that's missing in Bombay or in Paris for that matter? The argument by the Creative Destruction Lab is that the ability to have insight about what matters. If you're a person that comes out of the lab and you created some fancy new widget, but you don't know what entrepreneurship is about, the key difficulty that you have is to parse through the list of 1,000 things that you think that you need to do the next 6 months. And the most difficult part for these people, as we've seen it as researchers, is they pick the wrong thing. They don't know how to differentiate between what's important and what's not important. And so what we do in the Creative Destruction Lab, it's in a market for advice more than anything else. We advise these people, and it's not me, it's not the researchers that do any advice. It's the serial entrepreneurs that come in and says, okay, you need to do 3 things in the next 8 weeks, nothing else. Just do these 3 things, and it could be vary between, they get this advice over a rounds of 5 different rounds, and they usually shift from round to round. And I think this is one of the most important things that we've been able to do in the creative destruction, that we've been able to distribute the skill that these serial entrepreneurs have. I think it's a very successful partnership.
Thank you so much. Before we conclude, if there is any last piece of advice, any last comment that that you have for the institutes promoting entrepreneurship or for the student entrepreneurs.
Well, I think that from what you've heard here today from all of us, this is like a new world and it's evolving fast. So I think I would just like to end by saying thank you for bringing all of us together. I've learned a lot, and I think the more that we're sharing our ideas and examples and iterations that we're having and collectively work on them together, the better. We're building it all on the fly. It's a new exciting world. It's the COVID world. It's the new norm. It's what comes next. And I think there's nothing but promise ahead for entrepreneurs in India, the students we're working with from our program. And it's been great listening to all of these excellent colleagues here today. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, without this, the byproduct of this COVID is we are all here together having a discussion. It wouldn't have happened otherwise, right? This situation has forced us to innovate, and here is a new innovation where all of us are discussing together. We have never met each other, and all of you are experts in your field. I'm a newbie, so I get an opportunity to interact with all of you. So I'm really thankful for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Thomas. Do you want to add something?
I just want to say thanks for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure to see everyone here on the panel and hear all your different views. And I think COVID-19 has had a big impact on allowing us to reduce the burn of carbon dioxide. Let's see if we can keep doing that in the future.
So I have just one piece of advice for all the aspiring students, entrepreneurs in the audience. I know that many of them will be from India. And I know in India, we have an obsession with paper chase. We have to collect degrees. So I would say we're moving into a skills economy. Forget about the degree, just focus on the skill and acquire it the best way you know, whether it's through practicing it and yourself or by attending classes which give you a very good, deep understanding of a particular skill that you're trying to master. I think that's what you'll get hired for in the future, not based on where you get your degree or what degree it is.
Thank you, everyone. I think it was a pleasure to host you today. We're certain that the viewers of today's webinar were able to learn from your insights and experiences. It was an honor to have you as a panel member. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you.